At T-Mobile, our critical mission is providing unparalleled 5G coverage for when connectivity is mission critical. Introducing T-Priority, America's best 5G network experience for first responders, even in times of congestion. More capacity, faster speeds, better coverage. T-Priority from T-Mobile, built for tomorrow's emergencies, ready today. Discover more at t-priority.com.
For qualifying organizations on eligible rate plans, coverage not available in some areas and may be impacted by emergencies.
Welcome to the Ankler Podcast. I'm Elaine Lowe, staff writer and author of the series Business Newsletter. Here alongside the Ankler himself, Richard Rushfield, and of course, Sean McNulty, who's doing a Freaky Friday with me this week. I am hosting the podcast and talking about $9 billion write-downs, and he's working on his backhand, trying to get a little more topspin, right, Sean?
That will never happen, Elaine. No, that me and tennis have never gotten along. That's not why I don't know anything about the sport. But I will. But Rafa Nadal is not playing in the U.S. Open. I saw that. Are you okay?
I will never be okay, Sean.
Well, clearly I know. Yes, I did see that this morning. I was like, oh no, Elaine, your favorite's not going to be at the U.S. Open. But
listen, Andy Murray just retired at the Olympics. My little heart can only take so much this year of the greats retiring. But no, the real reason I'm in the hosting chair this week is, of course, because it's earnings season. For all of you listeners who can't get enough of hearing grown men in fleece vests say ARPU with a straight face. Richard, how would you guess what the earnings have been this week?
Well, there was Deadpool and Inside Out, and so I think people are saying movies are back, so let's put more money into these companies.
If you had to guess where Warner Brothers Discovery's share price was, like on a scale of things, how do you think they're doing this week?
You know, House of Dragons finale was very exciting, so probably fantastic, I'd say. Probably they tripled this year, I'd imagine.
Close. They are at the lowest share price ever, I think they've hit this week, dropping after yesterday's earnings report.
Do those people know that Damon bent the knee for Ragnatha at the end there?
No spoilers, Richard.
Really, Richard?
He's gonna his dragon is gonna join the.
I mean, I know nothing about what you just said, but I'm still angry at this, so it's all right. I don't know. I can't understand a word you said.
I think if the investors knew that,
I think you're making up things now.
They'd sing a different tune. Yeah.
A little more receptive. Yeah.
Well, Elaine, a little breaking news here: the WBD stock got back to $7. So we're back to $7. So that just happened.
Okay, well, good for them. Good for them. We'll take what we can get, right? But yeah, if there's like a WTF award to give out for this quarter, I mean, it's like Warner Brothers Discovery probably takes a cake around this time around, huh, Sean?
I mean, that was my headline in the wake up today. So that's basically listening to that earnings call yesterday, a good solid hour. And, when it's, as I put in the newsletter, when you write off $9 billion and you take 17 minutes in the earnings call before you bring that up, that's a choice, Elaine. That's a management choice for sure. I
mean, so the quick rundown is, aside from missing revenue forecasts and reporting some of the usual dreary figures we can come to expect from entertainment companies, 27% drop in TV studio revenue, 41% drop in gaming revenue. There was this, as you tell us, $9.1 billion write-down, sending shares tumbling to their lowest levels ever. Explain to us simpletons what exactly that means and how bad is it?
Sure. So $9 billion is way above any write-off we've seen in this whole era, obviously. So this is above and beyond over 2x anything, probably 3x we've seen so far in this whole post-streaming bubble era here. But, so essentially all brands and values and movies, they carry value on financial books through any studio. You assess a certain amount of value to the things you own. And at a certain point, if those things depreciate, from an accounting point of view, you have to account for that in your books. If you don't think that's coming back, you have to tell your shareholders, people who are invested in your company, that, hey, this thing we owned that we told you was worth this much is really worth this much. And they have come to this number of $9.1 billion of just the cable networks alone due to things we talk about in the Wake Up, talk about in this podcast, you talk about in Serious Business, due to cord cutting, again, distribution going down, it's less affiliate fee revenue coming in the door. The linear TV ad market, lo and behold, no one's dying to buy cable TV advertising anymore. That is not coming back. I don't say. And of course, the big NBA deal which will, they mentioned it specifically, as a factor in this, meaning, look, they're suing, for the rights, and it's obviously, but if you're doing a $9 billion write-off, you're not very confident you're going to win that lawsuit and get those rights back. So the NBA going away, which will then, again, lower the value of these TNT, TBS, these brands they own by not having that.
And they'd like to tout all of these other sports that are incoming on the network. They've got NASCAR coming back after a decade of not being on, and Roland Garros and all of this other stuff. But I mean, it's like that really doesn't replace the viewership apples to apples for a 40-year institution of the NBA.
Yeah, they have a couple of playoff college football playoff games coming in 2026. I think a few smattering of things. The MLB is still on there, but the NBA, just from they had 2 nights of NBA a week. They do till the season as well, 2 nights a week of NBA. That's gone, and that's over from essentially mid-October through April or even May into the playoffs. The playoffs are gone. So this is just from a volume point of view, Elaine, that's just so much volume of advertising that's not even going to add revenue that's not going to be there anymore. So that's what that $9 billion is all about. It's just saying it's gotten to this point where we have to literally put this on our books, or take it off of our books, essentially, remove that value from what we say WBD is worth, that's what that $9 billion is.
But streaming-wise, WBD on paper did okay. I mean, they added, X number of subs, and now they have 103.3 million subscribers. It's nothing to sneeze at, but you did the math there in the wake up, and you're saying the future it's not actually as nice of a bump as it seems.
Yeah, and there's a lot of, the number 3.6 million was the subscriber add for Max and Discovery Plus globally in Q2. They don't break out the services separately there. So, which, Elaine, 3.6 million sounds pretty positive,
good.
Right?
But domestically, how does that translate?
Where are they coming from, Elaine? Well, they're all coming from international. Max officially launched, it was HBO Max still in Latin America.
Yeah, they're in like 65 markets or something now,
65
right?
markets. They changed the branding to Max in Latin America in Q1, and then in France and a few countries in Europe in Q2. So some marketing efforts going on with that. So they added, a lot of 3.9 or 4.1 million subscribers internationally. They lost, subscribers domestically. That's a problem, especially in a quarter where you have Game of Thrones returning and you had the NBA playoffs. And they cited, the NBA playoffs ended mid-quarter, and they cited, churn as a reason there. They lost 300,000 subscribers in net. And those international subscribers, per subscriber, you make about a third, or maybe a fourth of the money, essentially $4 per subscriber internationally. You make about $12 for your U.S. ones, and you lost the U.S. ones, and you added the international ones. So the net of that is that subscription revenue over the course of a year, they added over 6 million, I think it was 6.7 million subscribers from Q2 2023 to 24. Plus 6.7 million subscribers, they make the same amount of revenue from subscription money in that time period. It didn't go up because they added international ones and they lost domestic ones. So look at how much money are you making, Elaine? And this is where it's just the numbers are just a tough time adding up. And it was a loss of $107 million total in streaming. And this includes, again, the HBO businesses involved, that is in this business line. Was a loss of like $3 million a year ago. So, and they've cut this. The spending was down of marketing and essentially staff and overhead was cut 17% year over year. So again, back to, you've written about this in Serious Business. Cutting the bone here, doing more with less, all the things we talk about. And with all these cuts and with these strategy changes, there's still $100 million in the hole. How does this thing get to be a profitable going concern in the black and growing? And that's where all these questions are coming in, Elaine, at this point. So,
and it's interesting with WBD because this is a similar story sometimes you could see across the business where there's a move to expand globally to try and acquire subscribers, but like the ARPU on those subscribers is not going to be the same as it is in the US and Canada as domestic subscribers. So this is a trend that we're not going to see stop anytime soon, right?
No, they're touting international. They're one plan they have, what's the plan here, Elaine? The one plan they have, and this is not until 2026 at the earliest, so we're talking 18 to 24 months, is expanding Max into the UK and Japan and Australia, these higher ARPU, higher revenue per subscriber markets, but that's in 18 to 24 months. But again, the US market is declining. They've lost 1.6 million subscribers in a year in the US. So you have to add actually 2 million subscribers just to get back to where you were in May of 20 or June of 2023. And
yeah, that's an awful lot of work to get back to the same.
A lot of work, a lot riding on the Penguin and on the return of White Lotus. Look, HBO has a bit of a dry spell. The strikes hit them pretty hard, which we've talked about here in the pod, but there's a lot of lift here that has to happen in the U.S. to raise those. And they just raised prices again to $17. So who knows what effect that might have on getting those new people in the door.
But movies did okay, right? Movie revenue was up,
it was
17%?
Yeah, movies were, they had Godzilla, and Dune 2, some remnants of that. They had, Furiosa was the big movie, but, the revenue was up.
For the record, I went to see Furiosa in theaters. I did
Warner
my
Brothers
part.
Discovery, Elaine put her contribution into the coffers there to WBD. The revenue was up, but profitability was down. So, you're not making as much money, but the revenue was up there. But it's a bigger picture question here, Elaine and Richard, where we're just going back to what this deal is. What did they do here with making Warner Brothers Discovery? Well, the whole thing is, things declined more than we thought it would be. It's like the only thing that Discovery added was the one business that was in decline, which was cable networks. It didn't, the studio did nothing to change the studio. It did nothing to HBO. If anything, it detracted from it by putting product next to it that was, pimple popper and things like that next to HBO. I was like, well, that may detract the brand. The whole
Says
thesis.
you, Sean.
Sorry, I apologize. That's my personal bias, and and trimming the marketing at HBO, which is the lifeblood of that that company, is the brand is equally as important or up there in terms of with the programming. So this whole thesis of what this whole thing, you just added more cable networks to this business, which is the dying part of the business. And this is 2 years later, Elaine. This is what it's just manifesting, and this is what it looks like at this point.
And we're going to talk about cable a lot today. But, first, Richard, you always say Hollywood is a business of hits. But how much do hits matter here when entertainment businesses across the board are as diversified as they are these days? I mean, obviously, WBD is slightly less diversified than like a Disney or an NBCU, which have theme parks. But I feel like when these earnings reports roll around, like sometimes film is just such an afterthought for some of these companies.
Well, I spoke a few months ago to a head of one of the companies who took issue with my rule number one, that it's a business of hits, because he said at this point, hits are a given, that you have to, it's assumed that you're going to have hits, that if you don't have hits, that's a disaster. But having hits just gets you to like baseline, and that's like baked in already. So that's no longer what the business is. It's a business of doing all this other stuff on top of it now. If you, like I say, if you don't have hits, that's horrible. But, I think we're in a kind of price to market period here. So we just had Paramount, and we tested the value of an entertainment studio right there, and had pretty dismal results. So if you call Paramount in the fire sale category, Sean, what category would you put Warner's condition in right now?
Right.
A little
Today,
above that, right?
Let me check my stock ticker again. Hold on. Yes. Pick 'em, I guess, at this point would be, it has more debt, so it's probably even worse off because from that reason alone, you have $41 billion of debt, where Paramount, you only had, I think it was $14 billion. So, I guess that would be your...
That's amazing. When $14 billion, it's like only compared to the 41 bill.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
So we only have 5 of these legacy studios. And if 2 of them are kind of in or hovering on the distressed asset category, what's that say about the whole sector here?
Yeah, what do they got to open theme parks or something?
Well, then you have the theme park question.
Yes, which we'll also get to.
Yeah, exactly. It's funny how it cycles through. But yeah, that's a real question, Lance. What what is the answer here? And there was a thing on the call, there's over an hour of an earnings call and just so much talking and no strategy at all. And it's just like, what do you guys, I have no idea what I'm even listening to at this point. How do you get your way out of this?
How would you have described the tenor on that call? I read the transcript after the call.
Oh, did you? Oh my God.
Yes.
You read that? Okay.
It was a novel, yes.
What did you think? I'd be curious what
it's so funny always just watching it in print when it's flat and you can't really hear the tone of the conversation. And it's just like, yes, this is happening, but really strong balance sheet. And it's like, where?
It just kept going. Like, it's so many words. I was like, and again, not the words that just would say, hey, we're changing the shift. This didn't work. Acknowledging that it's called the elephant in the room here. And it was just talking around just a lot of words that didn't really mean a lot of anything. I was I just didn't know what to make of it at all. And I was like, all right, you guys literally, there's no ideas here. That was my takeaway, is that there is no strategy here is to get out of this. The debt's a problem. Someone's going to come in and buy you. You're taking up the whole Comcast theory, right? Comcast and Warner's going to, all right, but you're getting $40 billion of debt in that, and you're just adding more of these cable networks onto your own cable networks, which is what the problem with the WBD deal was in the first place. So everybody's just, and it's, they're not alone. Disney has this, NBCU they all have cable networks. It's just less of a problem, Elaine, because they are more diversified as a company, but
and Warner's was the only one of these companies that really decided to add to itself in the cable network category over the last couple of years. It's not like they bought a theme park. It's not like they bought a movie studio.
They bought
a bunch of basic cable networks,
which we all knew were in secular decline. You talked to Doug Herzog in your piece today, which we'll talk about. But in 2017, he's like, "Yeah, we all knew this was not good. This was going in decline in 2017." So it's not like it's just a surprise, even though they kind of portrayed it that way on this when we bought this, the conditions have changed in 2 years. I'm like, that's not really, come on, maybe you guys thought that, but
yeah, that part hit me where they were like, this write down is coming because over the last 2 years, and I was like, wait, 2 years?
Yeah, nobody has been mentioning that the cable business was in decline at that point, so it's not quite adding up. So what do you do with it? It's it's a tough. Paramount found Skydance, Richard. They found a deal at least, Richard. It wasn't again, you call it a fire sale, call it what you will, but they found it out, Richard, and Larry Ellison, and now it's David Ellison's problem to figure out what to do with these things, or they're not going away. They bought them, and they have the debt still too.
Any suggestions, Richard?
Yeah, I think all these companies should start thinking about bake sales and all the other ways they can get character dress up days and everything else to get whatever money. I just don't see, if you're in a sector that's dependent on investment support, who's going to want to invest in it? Who's going to want to put money into this sector? Who's going to want to buy a share of stock here or anything when it's it's just such a troubled time investment wise.
Well, it's telling when you see password sharing crackdowns become like a topic of and this is how we're boosting things. I mean, first it was Netflix, and then this week we heard both WBD and Disney talk about it on their earnings calls, and it seems to be working for Disney. So I guess there, is value to it, but it feels a little bit like squeezing the last pennies from the jar, doesn't it? The password sharing crackdowns. I don't know.
Well, combine that with the price hikes, right? The other news this week was Disney raising prices for the third time in 2 years.
Tell me, how much am I going to be paying for Hulu now, Sean?
How much do you want to pay?
$10 for the ad tier a month?
I think it's $11 for the combo now. Hulu by itself is now $19 a month. And, it's interesting to look at the value here, where Netflix will probably raise prices end of year as well. They've hinted at that. They're still at $15.50. But you're telling me Hulu's $19 and Netflix, which adds new series, three a week or whatever it is $15.50, and just the value proposition about it. And Max is $17. They're all more expensive than Netflix, which arguably has the biggest array of content, or new content, volume. Exclusive content, the most volume. And the math is just, this is what the math's happening, Elaine, is right. The prices keep going up on these things because that's the solve. It's either password crackdown, number one, and the other lever they pull is price hike. And, we're waiting. The economy's, I put these little mentions in the newsletter every now and then. It's starting to flash a little red here. And this is the time when you're putting price hikes in October at Disney. And, you can only do it for some. They've done it before and seen no real churn come from that lane. But, you go one step too far here, and you can't put the price down. Put it out if something goes awry here, and you see a lot of cancellations going on. So.
But you want to talk about the streaming side of the business. I mean, going back to Warner's, what content revenue plunged something like 70%, right? There's just not as much licensing. But then on the flip side, you look at Disney and how their streaming situation is going, and all the headlines this week were basically, hey, they're actually making money on streaming. I mean, operating profit of $47 million, a big swing from a more than $500 million loss last year during the same quarter of a $512 million loss. So that is a solid swing into the black here. And they also, beat on earnings and revenue this week. So Disney, not quite the same story as Warner's, right?
Yeah, Disney, I mean, they're also more global. They have a much bigger footprint globally than Max does at this point. They also had a head start. I mean, not that a year or two matters, but it kind of does, Elaine, where, Max was essentially launched right in the pandemic, or HBO Max, I should say. And Disney got a head start at the
November 2019.
2019. And it's like, that's a very little amount of time, but that was a big thing. And again, first to marketplace, first to market, all that kind of stuff. Everybody else is following you. But yeah, again, they've raised prices twice in the past 2 years. Is the third. So how did they get there, Elaine, right? Well, they raised prices. Iger's famously, you've talked about in your column a lot, cut all that general entertainment spending. How much original content is even on Disney Plus anymore? Hulu's original series, the volume there has gone down significantly over the past few years as well. So they've got the spend down. They've raised the prices. They do the password crackdown. Lo and behold, we have a profit. And now this new price hike will then, come 2025, will again put that $47 million number theoretically, again, if people don't cancel, at a much higher rate. So Disney's, found a way through there, sort of.
And that's the thing I wonder, though, as a consumer, like if you're a person who already has 5 different streaming services, at what point does Disney Plus become, if you're not, say, someone like me with 2 kids under 10, right, when does it become a churnable thing? Like Disney Plus, this week, they've said they have 118.3 million subscribers, not including Hotstar, and Hulu has like 51.1 million. I mean, they're inching up, but it's like, at what point are we going to see a plateau there? Especially given the amount of new content that we're seeing in contrast to, Netflix putting out 1 new show a week. It's like, that's basically a staple at this point, and you get it for like $7 a month without, if you include ads. Like, that's not something that's you're gonna easily churn out.
I mean, we've been in this time for the past decade, like thinking of this as an unlimited growth sector that everyone could just keep growing and growing and growing their subscription ranks forever. And we're running out of planet here. We're running out of people that are just getting internet and want to get online. And going back to the rule number 1, there's going to be a bunch of services. And the ones that make things that people want to see are going to do well. And the ones that can do that consistently a lot, they will figure out some way to make a business out of that. Not a business of like eternal double-digit quarterly growth, but when you get viewers, you can make money off them a lot of ways. But again, you got to have the hits.
Well, I'll use Richard's favorite term, bundled solution, Richard, and the name of your emo rock band from the 1990s. What's driving the growth here, Elaine, is not necessarily, I'm just going to sign up for Disney Plus. It's like, this growth is coming from the Disney bundle, which is either Hulu and Disney Plus or ESPN. And now Disney Plus, Hulu and Max is also a new bundle you can also get. Don't forget that, but that.
I've lost track of all the bundles already.
I wrote oh my God, Elena, I wrote the list down with the Disney Plus, right, price hikes. And I was like, what in hot garbage is this? Like, I was like, this is
even before the venue. Is it, that's how it's pronounced? The sports streamer
before venue, so called Venu, and this doesn't include Paramount Plus or Peacock, which, and then you go to, there's a Netflix and Disney and Max combo on Verizon, whatever. It's like, as I wrote the joke, I'm like, you used to buy cable for one price, and the only question you had to ask was, do you want HBO? Like, that was literally back all we had to answer back in the day. And now I need to like get a chart out to figure out, what I want out of this. But the growth, Disney Plus did add 800,000 subscribers in the US. So Lynn, that growth is still going. That was in Q2. But again, that's probably all people not just people like, that many people signed up just for Disney Plus. Is probably people, why don't you get the bundle or upgrading, from just a Hulu only or things like that. So, because you're seeing what you're seeing. And what they do when you get a bundle, right, it's less per subscriber. Like, so if you're paying $19 for Hulu, but if you're paying $20 and you get Disney Plus, well, that lowers the per subscriber rate for each one, right? Cuts it in half. So we're seeing the ARPU, average revenue per user, go down at Disney Plus because of the bundling. So again, you're adding subs, but the money isn't going up accordingly, per se. So it just gets into a lot of math and minutia, makes this whole thing everybody glaze over, and I get it, but it is what it is. But it's just that subscriber growth ain't what it used to be, Elaine, I guess is what I'm trying to say here is, nobody's just signing up for that one thing except for Netflix, which has still maintained this and is still the leader. I will say simplicity, Elaine, wins out here where, it's one price, you can add tier or not add tier, that's it. And it's global and that's it, Richard.
I mean, Netflix has become the default.
It's the default.
And
exactly.
that's the one everyone's going to have.
And it's the simplest one.
And if you have kids, Disney Plus will be the other one.
Everything else is elective.
Well, or sports now, too, is the other factor they're pulling now.
No one is dethroning it as the default, and it remains a good bargain. So the price isn't sending people away. So, in terms of ranking the positions, I don't see anything coming along.
Yeah, I mean, Netflix is still $7. Disney Plus is now $10 a month, Elaine, as of October. So it's $3 higher. Max is also $10 a month. So again, Netflix, the one service that has arguably the most widest offering, has the lowest entry point price out of almost any, maybe I guess Peacock or Paramount Plus are in the same ballpark. But, it's just interesting to see how from a consumer point of view, what are you asking me for? What am I getting? It's like, oh, yeah, Netflix is great. I'll take that. Thanks.
The real trick of the streaming era is just making consumers do all of this math. Like,
people love math.
I don't know
that.
how much I pay. Like, if I had cable, I would know how much I paid, and I was mad about it then. And now I can't tell if I'm mad because they're all in 8 different places on my credit card bill, and I forget about half of them.
Richard won't know how much he's paying $20 more a month come October, or whatever he's going to be paying. Richard, your bill. You're not going to check that, right?
No, I think I'm paying like triple what I was paying for cable back when.
And you're about to be paying quadruple. So exactly.
It's ridiculous. It's not I'm remembering nostalgic for that brief period when this was going to be such a great bargain.
But I think you talk about Freaky Friday. It's like theme parks were kind of the downer in this Disney report. It's usually the other way around. Attendance is flat in this past quarter.
Weakening, exactly. It's showing. So essentially, it's you can't have everything going for you at the same time. Last year was theme parks were great and movies were in the toilet, and this summer the movies are back and the theme parks were the flashing red sign.
Can't have it all.
Can't have it all at the same time here, Elaine. So it's that's why we can't have nice things.
Richard, when was the last time you went to Disneyland?
Yeah, you were there recently, right?
You went this calendar year.
Spring break. Yeah.
How crowded was it during spring break?
I mean, uncrowded at Disneyland is like the most crowded place you've ever been in your life. So it's like there's nothing that resembles any definite. So they say, if it's down 10% or 6% or whatever, it's still just like you can't believe that there's this many people.
The line for It's a Small World, still an hour and a half. Yeah.
Yeah. There's plenty of room for that to shrink, but
we'll say so. Profitability was down 6%. They're still profitable by $1.3 billion, but the profitability wasn't quite what it was last year. So that was the change.
Right, but I think the attendance, like the foot traffic, was flat.
Yeah,
Disney theme park trips are a big ticket item.
Yeah, there's no cheap way to do Disney,
and also the question of how much you spend when you're there is another, because you can end up spending like equal to the ticket price when you get there. And I just think it's very sensitive to the economy.
We'll see if it's just a small blip or if this accelerates in Q3 and into Q4. Right. But if it does, that's add that to the list of things going on in the business.
One more question is that Universal is doing a big park building program.
Their big launch in 2025. Yeah,
they have a lot. Is that competition ever going to take a bite? I mean, as it was, there were enough people that both of those park families could be filled all the time. But is that an infinite case?
Yeah, Universal's not exactly cheap either, I'm sure, Richard. So you have one budget to spend there, Richard. Which one are you going to do? You're not doing both.
They both have a lot going for them. We will, and unfortunately, we will do both. not at the same time.
Richard just buys everything. This isn't a matter what. Streaming services.
He's everyone's favorite consumer.
Pretty much, yeah. Buffet tables, whatever you need here. Richard will take a little bit of whatever you got.
Well, having a 12 and 10-year-old is
they're driving the decisions there.
Any of us with kids, we're like single-handedly keeping all of these companies afloat.
That's the idea. That's what they're counting on.
But not so much with cable, which I want to talk about more after the break. But before that, don't forget, everyone, check your inboxes for the latest Dealmakers feature from Ashley Cullins about the death of cost-plus deals and how streamers like Netflix and Apple are rethinking their deal-making strategies. as well as Katie Rich's interview with filmmaker India Donaldson, and timed perfectly to earnings season, Claire Atkinson's latest story, this time on the often dead wrong but never in doubt Wall Street analysts who love to share an opinion on Hollywood. So make sure to check out the latest at theankler.com, and we'll be back in a moment.
Hey, Fidelity. How can I remember to invest every month?
With the Fidelity app, you can choose a schedule and set up recurring investments in stocks and ETFs.
Oh, that sounds easier than I thought.
You got this.
Yeah, I do. Now, where did I put my keys?
You will find them where you left them.
Investing involves risk, including risk of loss. Fidelity Brokerage Services, LLC, member NYSE, SIPC.
Lowe's knows that free is just better. That's why MyLowe's Rewards is free to join. As a member, you earn points towards MyLowe's money on eligible purchases, get exclusive free gifts, and earn free shipping at Silver Key status, all on top of weekly member-only deals. Don't wait. Join MyLowe's Rewards for free today and start saving more. Lowe's, we help, you save. Loyalty program subject to terms and conditions. Details at lowes.com/terms. Subject to change.
Welcome back to the Ankler podcast, everyone. Remember when cable was cool? I personally do not, but apparently lots of people in this town do. From talking to them for my series business newsletter this week. On this podcast, probably. Yeah.
VH1 ruled the world.
And I would like to ask you more about that, Richard, as an anthropological study. But, it's like cable was the original source of media fragmentation, right? And in this TV era of dominated by a handful of broadcast networks. And, for this week's series business newsletter, I was taking a look at the, no surprise, very dim cable jobs landscape of sort of like, what do you do if you work in cable now? It's like these earnings reports this week have done nothing to bolster anybody's confidence in their job security or their future in the cable business. The one upside on working on all of this is that it gave me the chance to talk to folks like Doug Herzog, who was the former head of Comedy Central and MTV. He was the OG MTV news director. And he told me the story I thought you guys would appreciate, which was that in the heyday of MTV, he said you could basically use an MTV t-shirt as currency. Like, he said, I could walk up to an airline ticket counter and, go get my coach ticket. And he said that this happened when he was in his 20s. And, you get into a conversation of like, you work for MTV? Oh, that's so cool. And he's like, do you want a t-shirt? And he's like, the next thing you know, you're flying first class. And it's like, can you imagine that happening today with like somebody wearing like an Apple TV Plus t-shirt? Like that's not something I imagine happening at the Delta air ticket office.
I think air travel has changed a bit too since the 80s, but the policies have been a little more strict. But yeah.
These brands really defined generations, and that's kind of what I wonder with the streamers. Like everyone is trying to be the streamer for everyone, but for MTV, there was a lot of value of being the default viewing for an entire generation for a long time, and they were known as the MTV generation, and it was even able to hand it off to become the VH1 generation later on. And none of the streamers. Every time I bring this, someone like Sean slaps me down. Bring this up.
Our popular debate, yes, exactly.
None of the streamers have shown any interest in doing a targeted approach. What if you become the default service for teenage girls? That has to be worth something, and it's a lot easier to lock up that than it is to become the default service for every person who has internet connection on the planet. But that's what cable really was. It would cable could define a demographic and build a network around it.
But the secret to MTV, Richard, was that everybody was paying for it. So even if only the kids were watching it, mom and dad were paying for it. Everybody who had cable was paying for MTV. When you're doing a niche streamer, only those teen girls or whatever is going to be paying for it. So that was the beauty of the bundle. The best business model that Hollywood will ever create, which is what the creating we're seeing now. So the math, yes, from a user point of view, Richard, I think you're onto something there. But making the finances work on that is a much more difficult proposition. In the streaming era, it just works differently.
I'm inventing the company. You bean counters don't figure out how to make the numbers.
Nerds figure that out. Yeah, I'm working the magic over here. Yeah,
I'm a founder.
Encapsulating the startup life perfectly.
Yes.
But yeah, to your point, Richard, it's like all of these, back in the day, it's like these were cultural identifiers, right? It's like, you walk around and you've got a t-shirt with a certain brand on it. You say you watch a certain cable network and it actually says something about you. It's like, who's strutting around being like, I watch Netflix, and like what does it mean? It means nothing. It means everything. Like, you're just a consumer of everything on the planet. And if you're going to build out even a niche streamer now, it's like, I wonder, is there ever going to be the possibility of having that same kind of cultural status?
I mean,
like if you're like a BritBox watcher or a Shudder watcher,
and then FX in their ways have that, and
but they're the last of that era. They're the last of that, the tail end of that.
And their parent companies don't seem to want anything to do with marketing to their target demographics. So, they haven't figured that out yet.
Yeah, I will say, Crunchyroll also announced the anime service that owned by Sony. Sony announced that they have 15 million subscribers, which is not bad, and that is a niche, and that grew 2 million subscribers in the past 6 months. So, Elaine, it's a business, and Sony seems to like it very much, but it's still 15 million subscribers, and as you mentioned, Hulu's at 51 million, in the U.S., whatever it might be. So it's just different scale of there's money, it's a profit, and it's you mean something, to Richard's point, to a very specific audience that way. So, you're seeing Starz kind of leaning to this now too. They have about 16 million streaming subscribers. They still have some linear TV subs there too, but leaning into certainly urban demographics. And the new campaign is, we're all adults here. They're kind of leaning into that not for kids thing. So back to Richard's point, so kind of just picking, so there is some differentiation you're seeing in streaming. But it's making the business work for you, Elaine. It's not like it's not Netflix, but it doesn't have to be Netflix to be a success. And maybe we're going to see more of that. You mentioned, BritBox, certainly for aficionados of UK culture. So
if you start somewhere in those meetings where the person's saying, well, we have to be Netflix. We have to beat Netflix. We have to, and if you could put a break on that and just say, but you won't.
Right. Well,
that's not happening.
That's not happening.
Not a battle we should start fighting now.
That's not a thing.
So we move on to Plan B instead of being instead of the failed attempt to dethrone Netflix? How about we have 3 of these services for different, which is the opposite way everyone's going. So obviously, I don't know what I'm talking about, but
well, I think sports is also falling into this lane where I think, Richard, you mentioned last week that Peacock, or maybe Elaine, you did, but 300 days of sports on Peacock next, once the NBA deal kicks in there, and it's like, all right, that's primarily a sports. Not that there's other overflow to it. There's NBC and other things on there, but that's a big part of it. Amazon will now be, essentially having football and NFL on. You're having 9 months a year. That's the premier marquee event happening on Amazon Prime every week. That's what's being promoted. When you turn on Amazon Prime, that's what you're going to be seeing is this, promoted to you. So that's kind of becoming a bit, and that's obviously it was the core of the cable bundle, and so that's kind of transferring over into, the principle into streaming for some of these people. So that's something, but maybe not as strong of a demo pull, but that's, I don't know, just as an observation.
Yeah, it's, when I was talking to Doug, he was saying that he's like a big believer in the cycle. And so that's what kind of got me thinking about this. He was saying, broadcast networks created the space for cable. And then he said something about AOR radio, which is something I had to Google. And
yeah, I didn't know that either.
It was like it created an opportunity for punk rock and new wave. And I was like, okay.
Sean, you don't know what AOR radio is?
Not ringing a bell there, Richard. No.
Album-oriented rock.
A genre.
Richard, I had to go down a Wikipedia rabbit hole to figure out what that meant.
You could have just asked.
I should have asked the in-house expert.
Because that was made up. Album-oriented rock, really? That's a genre? Yeah. Like, give me a break. What does that mean? Anyway. Yeah,
but the point is, his point is that you create something, it splinters off, and it's he feels like we're coming back around to that cycle, which is why he was talking about the niche streamers. And it got me thinking of just is it important anymore to even have sort of like a strong cultural identity as a niche service in the way that cable networks like MTV had or VH1 had back then?
And album-oriented rock, by the way, meant not just top 40, which is what every station was.
I call them deep cuts. Yes,
that is what the wiki said. Yes.
Yeah. For the record, there may be something there, but Elaine, I will note, as I mentioned Sony earlier, they had their earnings, Sony corporate, which is not the studio, had their earnings. And, back to what's the future of these things? And, it's nice to have these small streaming services, and that's fine. But, Sony has none of it. They have Crunchyroll, which is fine, but they're essentially making TV shows and movies, and nobody. I didn't even mention this, in the wake up really, because it's like it was tucked into an earnings report at Sony, Sony Corp in Japan, and they had a profit of $75 million or something like that. That was fine. It was down maybe 4% from last year. Last Q2 had the Spider-Man movie. This one had Bad Boys, which did well, but not as well, and nobody cared. And I think that's there was this era, which we talk, here, no one used to talk about earnings reports and whatever. And maybe if we can get past this cable problem, which is, and I don't know what that solve is, no one does, but you go back to being a pure play studio, it's not as sexy as, subscriber numbers, whatever, but nobody bothers you. And you just go and you have you have hits, you have a pretty good quarter, the library gets you through, you license it across the board, you have the IP, and you're the only 6 people in the world who know how to make this stuff and distribute it worldwide and market it. It's not terribly sexy, but that's what the business was for many years until streaming, and cable kind of amped it up. So I don't know.
The solution of what do you do with this cable problem is that the ending is you're going to write it off. You're going to do that either fast, or you're going to do it slow, or you're going to
saw it this week.
Do it by being bought and folded into another company in pieces. But one way or another, that's what you're going to do, and you're going to keep writing it off until you get down to zero.
Right, or whatever the base level of cable subscribership. AM radio is still a thing. Once dominated media, it's still the dial-up internet, whatever it might be. It's things can still exist, but it's just you're in this decline, and you got to take the pain. And it's this is what this $9 billion, back to the topic conversation, Elaine. This is what really the first company to do that of the studios, and saying, what. This is declined. We know this is no longer worth what we thought it was. So we'll see if it happens elsewhere.
Is there any analog for this write down? Has any other company up until this point done anything remotely similar, reassessing their value in this way?
That's tough. The write downs from the previous 2 years, a lot of content write downs, Elaine,
right.
and that was more writing off
aside
projects.
From projects.
In this business, that's a good question.
Take a look at everybody who owned a newspaper 20 years ago.
Well, right. I would say, or Maker Studios, when Disney bought that, right? They wrote off, but nothing to this scale, Elaine. That's what I'm thinking of. But certainly in principle.
Because I can't think of anything of an assessment of this broad of a scale. I think of individual projects that have been written off, or something like, I don't know, Vice or Maker, right?
Right. BuzzFeed's, NBCU's stake in BuzzFeed was written down. So, but it was not anywhere near this degree. And this shows you just how massive this cable bundle was for everybody, and this isn't even, it's not like they wrote all of it off. It was just $9 billion. There's still plenty of value that's still on the books that is only going to still decline, Elaine. This is not this is done. There's no reassurance here that in 2026, they won't be back saying, yep, you know what, 2 years went by again, and this thing declined another $5 billion or whatever it might be.
Oh, believe me, I learned that from talking to people who work in cable these past couple of weeks, of just the question isn't how long do I stick it out for if I work in the cable business. It's sort of, where is my off ramp? Where do I go from here? Right. I was talking to somebody who has been working at TNT Sports for over 15 years. And it's once you lose a 40-year institution like the NBA, even if you have all these other little sports rights coming in, it's sort of well, yeesh, what's next? That's enough to throw a whole network into an identity crisis. It's enough to prompt a $9.1 billion write-down.
But don't worry, Charles Barkley's still getting $21 million a year, Elaine, so he's fine. It's okay. He's staying at Warner Brothers Discovery. He's come around on Warner Brothers management, who previously couldn't shoot straight, and now...
Well, because he was saying, I'll consider deals at Amazon now.
He was doing everything. He was out there saying, you guys screwed this up and you're the worst. And now he's like, I'm so happy to be with my Warner Media leadership. And he's like, oh, I can still get paid $21 million a year and not have to work the NBA every week and just kind of hang out at March Madness and show up at NHL games, and you're still going to pay me? It's maybe that's not so bad, so even Charles Barkley has changed his tune on staying in the TNT Sports and the cable bundle. So
I don't know about the other folks who work at TNT Sports. I was where do you go from here? And one of them said, well, the leagues themselves have little mini studios when they put out promotional video or whatever. It's like you can be a content creator directly for the league now. And it's like, oh man, that'll be interesting if you start to see that kind of ship jumping of people just moving away from the distribution platform into the content itself.
And every team now, Elaine, has to also be their own business because the RSN, the regional sports networks, are going in the toilet with Bally Sports and so forth. So every team now has to have their own streaming service.
And they're relying increasingly on social, too, with their own video there, because it's like they're increasingly controlling their own PR, distribution and promo.
Yep, exactly. So you need people who know how to do that, which is not a lot of people, Elaine. So if you've done it at TNT Sports on the highest level and you go to the New Orleans Pelicans, that person knows what they're doing about how to do a streaming service, how to promote games, so...
And whatever you do, if you're considering that question, do not Google articles about what happened to newspaper employees after that.
I like how every other week we come back to remember newspapers.
Well, the original bundle, originally it was that bundle of news that you got at one price and it paid for all that, right? And now you do it a la carte. And that's kind of what happened on the internet. So yeah, exactly.
It feels very masochistic that we keep coming back to this as newspaper people.
I should say too much. I mean, I lived through the demise of this to the at the LA Times, I was at lunches and meetings where people said newspapers are never going to go away. This is how people find the weather and their movie times, and the internet can never replace that. And they all said it over and over again. And I just every week I'm on this beat. I have talking to Hollywood. I have terrible flashbacks to those conversations.
We've seen the future, Hollywood.
Look, Elaine, most of my career was at HBO, so it's like I'm balancing it out here on the HBO side of it. So between newspapers and HBO, Richard, we have both sides of the cover here.
Yes, we've been on the other side. I used to work for a daily newspaper that then became a weekly newspaper, and then I worked for a place that used to be a daily that became a weekly as well. So... And gosh, you see the consolidation, and that's what's happening now. It's like you look at the layoffs at places like Paramount, at places like Warner's, and it's like they're all just consolidating the back end instead of having like marketing departments for every single network. It's like, let's have one place that services the whole batch. And, I was talking to a former Showtime exec who was like, this is a zombie network now, which is, I feel like a wild thing to say about Showtime, or as it's known now, Paramount Plus with Showtime, as even the linear network is known, which I don't know how much sense that makes to the average consumer, but okay.
Well, here we are. We'll find out. Paramount has their earnings call right after this podcast recording, so we'll find out the latest from Paramount with more layoffs at Paramount. So read the Wake Up on Friday if you want to find out what's up with Paramount. So I'll be recapping all of that new developments, the latest snapshot. So. Good stuff.
But to end on a different note, on a lighter note, I got to ask, though, for both of you, Richard, when did you think cable was cool? When
it first really came into general use. And I mean, I remember when MTV debuted, and it was like you could, and they showed the same 3 videos over and over and over at the beginning, but it was...
Were they ridiculousness? No.
They're not different same principle, different programming, Elaine. So exactly. They were Van Halen back then.
They showed Journey videos.
Journey, separate ways. Come on, listen.
Over and over, and they, the big event was the Friday night video fights.
Friday night, right? Yes, call in, and vote.
Which was every week they would show 2 videos, and then the viewers would vote which one they liked the best
by calling on their phones.
It was a huge event.
I remember that
there, and it was. It was Journey that won it. Was it Journey that was
I remember Phil Collins Against All Odds winning most for like 10 weeks in a row or something. And I was really pissed off as a 10-year-old for some reason about that. But I don't know why.
I mean, this is what you just put on. I was just the TV in general was not particularly cool in any way at that time, and this was something edgier and rawer and more immediate, and they kept that going through a couple generations there before.
Well, the thing you got to understand, Elaine, is that cable wasn't everywhere. In the 80s, if you had cable, it was like, oh my God, you have cable? Like, because they had to lay cable.
Because you had to pay for it.
Well, no. They had to put cable, they had to install actual cable to households. That took years to like, so it'd be like some neighborhoods wouldn't even have the option of getting cable. You'd have to stick with, and then so that was part of it too, was like, part of the buzz about it wasn't just like, anybody can get it. It's like
infrastructure involved.
Like that person on the, like, a 5-minute walk from your house, like, you guys didn't get wired yet, did you? And it's like, oh, no. And I was like, you're in that neighborhood, So it was a bit of like that going on top of everything Richard just said. And then, and it was also, look, Elaine, you live on rabbit ears, but like, staticky pictures and, cable was crystal clear. You didn't have any of that crap that used to be a problem with rabbit ears and TV. Like so from a technology point of view, it was a breakthrough in that regard, and a cool factor of not just being cool and like, but also like even having cable was another part of it. So
I don't think I knew that.
Here in LA, there was something called the Z Channel. There had been a documentary made about it, but this was before most people had HBO even or on TV. Then it was this one crazy guy's who was an art film fan, and you watched these great films without the idea that like you'd put on your TV and watch a movie without commercials, and you could see, the only movies you could see there generally on your TV were like the ABC Sunday night movie, which were kind of the big movies that had been in theater 2 years ago, or else on some UHF channel you'd have weird. But you see great movies without commercials on your TV. It was very cool.
Fascinating. Thank you for the history lesson, you guys.
Things that will be lost, and things we still to tell by the campfire here, or campfire stories of cable television.
I thought I was going to have stories to tell my kids about dial-up noises.
Trust me, when they're 10 or 15 years older, they're like, What'd you used to do? It's coming for you.
Well, lastly, to wrap it up, I know box office is more your jam than mine, Sean. So why don't you tell us a little bit about, I don't know, talk me through this one. Apple is changing some policy on something. What's going on?
We always ask Richard, what's Apple doing here? What is what exactly? And they're changing their mind again. I'm beginning to think there's no underlying plan here, Richard, but that can't be right?
I'm sure. I mean, it's all hanging on whether each show has a great launch. And rule number 7 here is there are no secret plans, and everybody's been looking for the Apple plan in Hollywood since they launched this here, and there have been no leaks out of what the secret plan really is. So,
well, whatever it is, it's apparently shifting again, guys, because the movie Wolves, which has had 2 of the biggest stars in the world, Brad Pitt and George Clooney, is now not going to be theatrical and is going to be going straight to Apple in September. Instead, they'll have a limited theatrical release. So this is Apple. They were, shifted their policy to be theatrical. They then, had done, I think, 4 or 5 releases at this point, and now they're pulling this back to be streaming only. They're debuting today a new Matt Damon, Casey Affleck movie, Instigators, also only on Apple. And again, that's Matt Damon, a Matt Damon movie. So
that's an interesting choice.
Different, yeah. And they also, so they moved Wolves to Apple TV Plus, exclusive essentially. It's playing Venice in a couple of weeks, but by the way, and they also ordered a script for a sequel for the movie. So
already,
yeah, before it even debuted yet. So again,
has that been done for a movie that's not like a franchise before?
Outside of like Lord of the Rings, where you have to shoot a couple at the same time, kind of thing.
Yeah, but it's like based on a book, though. I mean, like, is Wolves based on something? Is there an original?
It's original concept as far as I know.
Intriguing.
So yet another chapter here in the Apple journey in Hollywood, Elaine. But no George Clooney and Brad Pitt now have a streaming movie. I'm not sure F1 will get the same treatment from more. They'll pull F1 next year with Brad and Jerry Bruckheimer producing there. So, but a curious move, Elaine.
I think the thing that bothers me most about all this is that it's pluralized that way as wolves. Wolves.
Not wolves.
Why do I have to say that? Wolves.
Maybe that was part of the problem. I really don't know. But Elaine, it ends with us. The big movie. There could be a big movie here. Opening from Sony and Justin Baldoni starring and directing in this with Blake Lively.
Colleen Hoover.
The
She's huge.
The tracking is, it's looking to be a pretty big hit. Unless it really goes off the rails here, but another, Richard, another week here where we have another movie coming out that, defying all expectations here to become another phenomenon. Hopefully we'll see what the numbers are, but a lot of optimism out there, Richard.
Yeah, the stocks will soar next week.
Yeah, I think Sony stock will not be moved on this
Always
movie.
the
I can
optimist,
guarantee
Richard.
that. Yeah, exactly. But anyway, we'll see. I'll wrap it all up for Sunday night at the Wake Up, or whatever happens at the box office late on Sunday night.
Yes, everyone, you should make sure to read the Sunday night edition of The Wake Up to prepare you for the week. And everyone else, make sure you're also subscribed to the rest of our suite of Ankler newsletters at theankler.com. And please do follow us on the socials at The Ankler across wherever you get your social media. All right, guys, I'm going to hand the reins back to you next week, Sean. This has taken an immense amount of time away from me perfecting my serve. So I think I'm going to just have to give you the hosting chair back next week. And Richard, you won't be here at all.
Richard's away.
No,
Richard's
I'm
gallivanting
gone for a couple weeks and then be here briefly and then off to Toronto. So
exciting.
Busy month.
Jet setting.
Jet setter, Richard Rushfield. Yeah, exactly.
We'll have to get the notes from In the Field from you, Richard.
Yeah, tell us what's being advertised overseas, Richard. You have the European report.
Absolutely. Be keeping an eye out.
All right. Well, thanks so much for listening, everyone, and we'll see you next week.